Hello and welcome to this video where I'll be guiding you through the installation of the water cooling kit for a MAG-8200. As you can see here, we've already completed the setup and building of the stand. Make sure that if you have not already built the stand, to start with that first. We have a very nice video on the assembly of the stand. The first step in installing the water cooling kit is that we install the shelf for the water tank. This goes on the lowest position of the 3-bolt hole pattern, and it's under the tabletop on this side opposite the balancer arm, because our drain tube is going to come down here out of the grit guard off of the water catch tray, which you'll see later. So we need that tank underneath the sharpener. So again, this shelf is opposite the balancer arm. One more point to note when you set up this shelf is that the bolts that go in these corners for strength, the bolt head has to be on the inside of the tray and the nuts are on the outside. If you have the nuts on the inside, there will not be enough room for the water tray to fit. And then you can also notice these 4 holes in all the corners. We'll be using these later to use bolts to come up into the tank. Next, I'd like to show you some of the parts that are going to be involved in this installation. First of all, we have some of the splash guards. There are a front and back splash guard. This large guard is also another splash guard. The large yellow tray is the catch basin for the liquid to run the liquid into the tank while sharpening. You'll find a gallon of coolant. This will be the hose that'll go from the catch tray to the tank. You'll have your grit guard and grit guard sides. This will be packed inside with the sharpener, and keep in mind when you're looking at the instructions, the water cooling units do not have a grit guard bottom. The tray is what is the grit guard bottom in this case. And then next we'll unpack the items inside the tank. Here you'll see the filter sock. After the packing materials outside the tank, we can look inside. Inside here you'll see in the corner the black box is the water pump. The blue box is your refractometer. That'll need to come out. And then lastly, the bag of parts and caulk that will also need to come out. Okay, inside the tank we have that refractometer. And a bag of parts, and that's everything. Just the pump remains inside. Inside this bag we'll have the caulk we'll be using. There's hardware to mount the tank to the shelf we showed you earlier. We have the inlet flange, which will have to get connected to the water tray. And then we have the hardware and rubber feet for the water tray. Now that we have everything outside of the tank, we could put the filter sock back in. So simply just guide that into the hole, and the metal ring of the filter will sit on top of the rim. And the cover that you took off, you can just hang on to and use as a storage cover in the off season or when you're not using it to prevent evaporation from the tank. So hang on to this, it's just the storage cover. Now we will begin preparing the water catch tray for the water-cooled system. What we'll be doing is connecting the inlet flange so we have a place to connect the drain hose. And we'll also be putting on 4 rubber feet, which you'll find in the hardware bag that was inside of the water tank, along with the caulk. We'll need to caulk the ring around the flange, as well as we'll be caulking where the 4 feet go. Here we have a closer look at those parts. Here's the caulk we'll need, the inlet flange, and inside the hardware bag we'll take a look at these parts. This loop that you see will be used later to retain the hose that's coming up from the water tank to the back of the water tray. Here we have the rubber feet, and you'll notice there are 4 of them, but 2 are short and 2 are tall. The short ones will be closest to the drain hole of the water tray to create more pitch for the water to flow to the drain, and the higher ones will be in the back, in these back areas further away from the drain. The feet will be held on by these 1-inch stainless steel button head screws, and the rest of these screws will be used to affix the inlet and the rest of the tray to the 8200. Now let's install the inlet flange on the water tray. You'll want to turn it upside down. Now we have the bottom of the water tray, and the flange will go here. We'll need to caulk this, so we'll get some caulk ready here. Next, you'll need a 5/16 socket and the little self-tapping screws. And I find it's easier if you immediately put a screw through and look down to help line up the hole. And don't tighten the first one, get them all started. We'll turn the tray back over. And now we can wipe some of that caulk along the seam and make sure it gets all around to close up the seam. You can also put a little bit more around the screws themselves if you like, but we want to make sure we have a good seal there so nothing leaks. Now we're ready to install the rubber feet. We need to turn the tray over again. Now again, these rubber feet, as we talked about before, you'll notice there are some taller ones and some shorter ones. The shorter ones need to go closer to the drain hole because, again, that is how we're creating pitch so that the water drains. So I'll get these ready by just setting them where they're going to go. We'll take our caulk again. And again, look at the rubber foot. There's an inset side, and then there's a completely flat side. The flat side is where we want to apply caulk. And then stick that over the hole. And then what you can do is you can take an Allen wrench just to help align and make sure that you're over the hole, because we want to get that aligned. And once we have those lined, you can put a little pressure down onto them so the caulk squeezes out and really makes a good seal. Now we'll be placing the water tray onto the stand tabletop. You'll notice there are 4 smaller holes in the corners of the tabletop. I recommend locating off the front ones first because they're a little easiest to find because they are closest to the corners, especially this one in the front. Now, it will be easier if you do this with 2 people, but it is possible with 1 person. I'm going to lift the tray up and try to gently locate it over where those holes are the best I can. I'll then use the 1/8 inch Allen that will be needing to tighten them to first locate them all, then put the hardware in. Okay, we have the first one aligned. I'll take one of the button head screws and the nut. And we can just put that on loosely, and we'll do that for the other 3 now. Now that all 4 are started, we can tighten them down. And we don't need to apply a whole lot of torque. You don't have to squeeze the rubber foot. You just want to make sure that the screw is coming through the nylon insert in the nylock nut. So we'll come down here and get these all tightened. Again, you'll need an 1/8 inch Allen and a 3/8 wrench. Now these 4 positions where the rubber feet connected the water tray to the stand tabletop will locate where the sharpener goes. So the rubber feet on the 8200 have a recessed area that these nuts will fit into. So you will just set the sharpener on these nuts. But just for an additional seal, we do recommend to caulk around these nuts before you lower the sharpener on. So we're going to put some caulk around them. Now here we have our 8200, and it's ready to be placed into the water tray. Do keep in mind the 8200 is right around 90-95 pounds, so it is a little heavy for one person, and also to locate onto the nuts. So if you can, have a friend help. Here we can see the rubber feet are seated onto the nuts, and some of the caulk is squeezing out around, which will make a very nice seal for us. The next thing we're going to do is put the water tank in place and connect the hose. We're going to do this in this step so that you just have more view here before we put some of the other guards on. So we'll take the tank, and it places right into the tray, and you'll notice the hose is towards the front and also the graduation so that you can read the number of gallons in the tank. We can take the cord and bring that over to the back of the sharpener and plug that into the outlet. Next we can take the water tank hardware and open that up. And you may have to wiggle the tank around a little bit to find the threaded hole. Now that we have the bolts all started into the tank, you can lightly tighten them with a 1/2 inch wrench. Make sure not to over torque this because they are threading into a plastic nut. Now we can take our drain hose and insert that. There is a handle inside of the filter sock for removal later. You'll want to make sure to put that off to the side when you insert the hose. Put the hose first into the filter sock and then bring it up to the inlet and rotate it, and it'll slip right on. We can also connect the hose from the tank to the machine. There's a barb right under the motor behind here, and we can hook that and push that onto the barb. Now this is where we just connected the hose to this 90-degree barb, and we'll be using that loop that we showed you earlier as a retention for this hose. And you'll see here's the hole. And then we'll take one of the self-tapping screws and drive that in. Now we have one more hole that connects the tray to the 8200. So again, we'll use one of those self-tapping screws. And this is where we plugged in the pump. This outlet is switched by the blue switch cover. So by plugging the water pump into this outlet, we'll be able to turn the pump on from this switch. Now we need to install all of the safety and splash guarding. Here we have the grit guard top. We'll start with this part along with the pack of grit guard sides. We'll open this up to get the hardware out. In this hardware pack, it'll be mainly the self-tapping screws that you use the 5/16 socket for, but there will be two button head screws with two nylock nuts. And those will be used to attach through these two holes the top of the grit guard. So it will sit like this. But we're going to first attach this to the tray and the other splash guards, and then lastly connect those two screws to the 8200. So first we'll want to install the grit guard sides. These sides only fit one way, so if the holes don't line up, you have it reversed. These panels go on the inside of the lips. And what I want to draw your attention to is we're only going to put in the top screw, okay? Not these two side ones, because they have some shared holes with the splash guards, which will go here. Now that we have the sides prepped, we can connect the grit guard to the water tray. And the grit guard goes inside the water tray. Now that they're tight, we can do the side guards. We'll do this front one first. The front splash guard has the logo on it and more clearance for your hand and arm. Okay, now we're ready to install that front splash guard, which will go here, and we do recommend caulking these surfaces. So we're going to caulk up the side where the other flange of the splash guard will connect. And you can also caulk along the inside of the yellow. And then there is one more hole here, so there are 3 screws to secure the front splash guard. Now we'll install the rear splash guard, which is the same process as the front one. We've got that same flange here that we're going to caulk. So we'll first caulk that on the machine here. Now we have to make the last connection between the 8200 sharpener body and the grit guard and tray. And that is those 2 holes we had here with the button heads that I mentioned earlier. We didn't connect those yet. And the easiest way to do this is by removing the either grinding wheel or in this case the belt and contact wheel. We'll quick do that now. Now I'll be connecting with the button head screw. It is easiest with an L-shaped Allen wrench and a 3/8 box wrench. This is a 1/8 Allen. Remember, the arbor is a left-handed thread. We have engraved here an arrow with plus. Plus means to tighten. Here we have a rear view of the MAG-8200, and this is the approach or side of the machine that you would use for doing left-handed lawnmower blades. And one of the things we wanted to control is any splashing from the liquid. So this third splash guard has a magnet mounted here, and this top lip sits on top of the grit guard, and the magnet holds off of this side of the splash guard, boxing this area out so you're not getting any splashing when you're sharpening a right-handed blade. Now you may see we've got these rounded surfaces cut into this piece of steel, and that is so the liquid can drain back. If the liquid were to get and drain on the outside of here, it allows it a way back to the drain. Now the real innovative and neat thing about this splash guard is it is reversible. You can simply take it and turn it around and install it the same way on the other side, and the magnet will connect. And now you have a rear splash guard if you primarily do left-handed blades. So it can be used on either side of the machine. Here I've got the unit spun around again, and I can show you that magnetic splash guard on the right-hand side. So again, the top portion here rests on top of the grit guard. The magnet connects to the fixed splash guard here, and again we have those rounded curves so that if any liquid gets on this side, it's allowed to drain back towards the drain hole. One quick item we can install is the work table, and we'll put in the flat work table since we have the 2-inch wide belt grinder installed. And we'll set that into the modular work table and tighten the vise. Now that we have all the guards in place and everything is fully assembled, we're ready to put some water into the system to test the pump. I recommend first putting in about 2 or 3 gallons of water and testing the pump and making sure you don't have any leaks, because we don't want to have to waste any coolant. So first test the system with water. I've got a pail here with about 3 gallons in it, and we can simply pour that right into the tray. There we've got the water added. This is also a nice time to check your pitch. Do remember that you have 4 leveling feet on the stand. You can adjust the leveling feet also to create pitch this way towards the drain hole, as well as leveling the unit front to back. If you're getting a lot of pooling in this front corner, you can make the front foot a little bit taller and even some of that out. We do have, of course, the pitch that we built into with the rubber feet. The shorter ones are in the front and back, so we've already got some pitch this way, and you'll notice in the tray we've got some bend lines also to create pitch to direct water that way. Now that we've got water in, we could turn on the pump. Here, this red lever is a valve for controlling the flow of coolant to the wheel, and then I'll open this up so you can see the nozzle a little better when we test. And here's the coolant delivery nozzle. This is adjustable, so depending if you have a wheel or a belt in here, you can adjust this up under the wheel a little bit more or less, as well as control the flow with the valve. So we'll turn on the blue switch, which again controls that outlet that the pump is plugged into. And you can see we have coolant bubbling up there. We can open it up all the way. And there you can see more running. And we can let that run for just a little bit and just kind of watch and see if we have anything leaking anywhere. And it looks like everything is watertight. We're now at the step where you can add coolant to the system. The coolant we include is 1 gallon of a machine cutting fluid that is designed specifically for grinding. Now, the gallon we include essentially will give you enough for 2 charges. The easy measurement is having 5 gallons of water in the tank and then adding a half gallon of coolant. This will give you about 3 bricks when you measure it with your refractometer. Now, something to note about deciding how much coolant or how much to have in the tank. If you are a very heavy user with extended periods of grinding, where you're going to, if you think about it, heat up that liquid over time, having more fluid in the tank, having that 5 gallon plus the half gallon of coolant, will give you the biggest, let's call it, battery of cooling ability. If you grind a little bit less frequently and your blades maybe aren't as bad, you could have 3 or 4 gallons in the tank and you wouldn't have to have as much. So the reason we make that note is keep in mind there is a filter sock that is hanging in the tank. The more full you have the tank, the less space at the top of the filter sock can the filter have the water go back into the tank and filter out of the sock, because most of the sock is sitting submerged. So when you have the tank relatively full, you should check the sock a little bit more frequently, because if a lot of grindings build up in that sock, you'll have less capacity for the sock to return the water to the tank, and an overflow would be possible. Now, if you're sitting more at 3 or 4 gallons, of course, more of the filter sock is outside of the fluid and has a little bit more capacity. If you want to do less than the 5 gallons, you would need to use the included refractometer that we provide to first add a little bit of coolant, then take a reading by using, there's a pipette included where you would draw up a little bit of the liquid and drop it on the slide of the refractometer, close the slide, and then you can hold this up to the light and you can look in the scale, and it is a bricks scale inside, and it will give you a numeric value. You want to be between 1 and 3 bricks. So we don't want to drop below 1, because then that means the tank is more water than coolant, and you can get rust, or the grindings will start to rust inside of the machine and on the tray and in the tank. We don't want that. That'll turn the coolant orange. And you don't need to be above 3 bricks, because we don't need any concentration higher than that. So you're generally trying to stay between 1 and 3, and that gives you the greatest lubricity and rust prevention. Now, do keep in mind, because it is more water than coolant, in warm summer months you will get some evaporation. So generally speaking, about once a month, visually just look at what the level of the tank is and check the concentration with the refractometer. Most of the time you'll have to add more water back to the system because of evaporation. You generally only lose coolant on what is on the blade when you have to towel the blade off from grinding. We talked about the valve here for adjusting the coolant flow. Depending on how aggressively you would like to grind, you can adjust that valve for more or less coolant. So if you would like to grind very aggressively, you might like more flow over the abrasive. This concludes the installation and setup for the water cooling system for 8200 series sharpeners. And do remember, the water cooling system can be used both with a grinding wheel or abrasive belt. All of our abrasives at Magna-Matic are designed to be used either dry or wet. I certainly hope you found this video helpful and informative, and a good guide in the installation and setup of your water cooling system. If you need to get back to any other service videos, remember, we always have the QR code right on the sharpeners to be able to get back to any of the use or service videos. If you would like a little bit more information on coolant and the refractometer, we have a separate video just on the refractometer. I thank you very much for watching. Please like and subscribe, and if you need any supplies or parts, please visit Magna-Matic.com.